starting point so far this summer. And if you haven't been here, this is your first time, we'll get you caught up real quick with kind of in week one, we talked about our framework of faith and kind of how we grew up and the things we learned, the things we perceived, and how it was a little different as we got older to the real world experiences that we came in contact with. So we had to kind of get to a starting point where we had to figure out, what the question we used was, who is Jesus? And that's kind of what we talked about. And then Zach kind of picked it up in week two, where we kind of had to come to some realizations that, we're all sinners and that we've all sinned and that we're in need of a Savior who is Jesus, who offers us forgiveness and hope and restoration. And then last week, PC kind of shared about Abraham and how he was the father of many nations and how sometimes we've got to be faithful beyond our feelings. And we saw that through several scriptures where God was talking to Abraham in Genesis. And we kind of left with the question of what if the starting point of our relationship with God is trust? And that's really true with any relationship. With any relationship, the basis is usually always trust. So if you've missed a Sunday or you haven't been able to catch up or you've been out or this is your first time here, I highly encourage you. You can go to our website at www.mylife.church, or you can download our Life Church app and you can get caught up on all the messages that you may have missed. Again, the way this series works is it kind of compounds. Every little bit adds up towards the end. So get caught up. In fact, this message will be posted later today or by tomorrow morning, so you'll have access to that as well. So in case you missed it, we got you covered. No worries. So today, what we're going to be talking about is the role of rules. Practically speaking, rules are often the centerpiece of any type of religious life. And many people think like the Ten Commandments are the rules that make the relationship with God possible. And that if you follow the rules, everything will be fine and hunky-dory. And then if you break the rules, God's going to be all mad at you. But he won't. He got forgiveness. He got you covered. So, but what if the relationship with God doesn't depend on our obedience? What if when it comes to your relationship with God, what is the role of the rules? And this is kind of going to be where we're going to spend some time this morning, kind of help dissecting that. So within every religion, no matter which one you believe in, there's always some type of rules. Those rules are usually made by a rule maker, and that rule maker never gets to be us. We never get to make the rules. I would love to make the rules. It would be so much fun. But we don't get to do that. Otherwise, we'd make weird rules and we'd get in trouble. But every religion has some type of rules, and over time, as we grow older, we end up bumping against some of those rules. And let's be honest, we even tend to rebel against some of those rules. And that leads us to the question, what's with all the rules? Why do we have to have all the rules? So many different rules for us to follow, even as Christians. It breaks down into maybe what religion you grew up with. Maybe it's Catholic, maybe it's Baptist, Methodist, Protestant, whatever it is. Each had their own set of rules to follow, and over time, those rules didn't match up with our real world or our life experiences, which ended up leading us to break the rules or to rebel against them. Ultimately, this kind of led us away from our faith, which is why we have now re-arrived at this whole starting point where we're trying to start over and start fresh. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is there a relationship between rules and religion? And is there a starting point for rules and a relationship with God who cares about us and loves about us? So rules always assume some kind of relationship. It doesn't matter if it's the church world, if it's the secular world, wherever it's at, wherever there is rules, there is some type of relationship. Wherever you're accountable to others or accountable to a set of rules, there is some sort of relationship. So to help us understand this, we're going to look at a couple different categories that could or can potentially we can fall into. The first one being the family model. So there's the family model and the club model. The family model is you're born into a family and you become part of the family. And then your parents start giving you rules as you grow older. And as you grow older, the rules adjust here and there to different things, to the different age levels that you're at until a point where you're old enough and you don't have to abide by the rules anymore, but you're still part of the family, which in my opinion is the best time ever. Because that's the time where you finally get to say, no, I'm good. I don't have to follow those rules. I'm good. We don't have to do that. Or, you know how that works. You got to be home by like 11 o'clock. No, not anymore. We use that whole, I'm grown. I can do what I want. It's the time that we love to, we're still part of the family. We're not going to get hated on, but we just don't have to follow all the rules. And for some of y'all know what I'm talking about. For some of y'all will understand one day when you get there and the joy of not having to follow the rules. And you've never been so happy to tell somebody you got a job and you have to go to work and you can't go to that crazy aunt's house who leaves lipstick marks all over your face when she kisses you because she so pinches your cheeks, because nobody likes that. Nobody. Because that crazy aunt's like the one on the Christmas Story. You end up in a pink bunny suit. Oh, it's bad. It's very bad. So we just avoid those like we're going out of style. So, but we have to follow the rules to an extent. And even though we grow old enough and those don't apply to us anymore, we're still part of the family. So remember, and this is important, in the family model, we're part of the family and then the rules are established. It's not the other way around. And we also have to remember another very important thing. As parents, we get to set the rules for our children. The problem is we just don't get to set the rules for everybody's children. And as much as we would like to, as much as we would love to, we just don't get to do that, because then that would be weird. If I called up my friends and was like, hey, man, what's going on? Hey, what's up? Put your daughter on the phone. What? Put your daughter on the phone. Hey, your homework's finished? You got your teeth brushed? Go to bed. What you waiting on? We don't get to do that. As much as we would like to, and you know what I'm talking about. You're at the grocery store, and you see that child acting in that behavior that you know of, and you look at him going, "Ooh, if that was my kid, yes, Lord, he wouldn't be able to sit down for a week. I would teach him something quickly." Or you're sitting there going, "Oh, he's going to get it so bad when he gets home. He just don't even know it yet." We would love to set the rules for everybody's kids, but we can't. So rules don't make you part of the family. You're already a part of the family, and because you're part of the family, the rules are there to help guide you. The other model we refer to is the club model, and the club model is pretty straightforward. It's some type of organization or club or fraternity or job employment, because it all kind of interwoves together. But basically, there's some type of contract, some type of rules, some type of expectations that you have to meet and agree to ahead of time. So I've got to meet all these parameters. I've got to meet all these objectives. I got to follow all these rules, and then maybe I can get in. And maybe I can be part of a relationship from there. And once you agree to the terms, you're in. And as long as you don't mess up and as long as you follow the rules, then what? You get to stay in. But if you break the rules or you don't do what they tell you, boom, you're on the outs super fast. So it's important to understand the difference. And the family model, you got some rules because you were part of the family, and that was to help guide you. You were already established a relationship. Whereas in the club, there is no relationship right away. We got to follow all of these rules and hope that we get to develop into a relationship. And then sometimes we don't fit really into either one of those. So we end up into what we have classified as the third model, being the neighborhood association model. And in this model, you kind of just don't know where you stand. You're just kind of in limbo. You just don't know. You're just hanging out. It's kind of like when you buy a house, in those special neighborhoods, and you got to follow all their rules. And you move in, as long as you follow the rules, you don't hear nothing. But then if you do weird stuff like forget to cut your grass for like a month, or let all your plants die, or start building a fort in the front yard, then you start getting these little nasty grams. And the nasty grams, I don't know how much they can really do to you, but they can just end up making your life miserable, right? Because you kind of get all the little nasty grams. Oh, sir, you're in violation of the shrub policy. You're out of shrub compliance. And I didn't even know there was shrub compliance. But apparently, there's shrub compliance. I remember on one of my trips to Texas, I was visiting my aunt, and when I walked in the house, because we get there about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night when we leave after church on Sunday, and I walk in, and she looks like death. And I was like, hey, what's going on? Outside in the heat all day, and I'm like, are you going to die? What's going on? Like, I'm off duty. I'm not trying to really work right now. And she's like, no, we was outside planting flowers and shrubs all day. And I was like, well, why? You're old. Why don't you pay people to do that? You're really old. And she's like, well, basically, we got a nastygram from the neighborhood association. Said all of our plants were dead, and they were. And the shrubs were dead, and they were out of shrub compliance. And basically what happens is theirs is a little more strict, but they had to have specific plants and specific shrubs and a specific arrangement in their flower bed, and they didn't have it. So they got the little nastygrams. So I was like, that's a lot of work. I hear you. But we just don't know where things are going. We just don't know where we stand with anything, because as long as we sort of follow the rules, then we just don't hear anything. So we don't have any answers to those questions. So for some of us, we get left in limbo, and we don't know what to do, where to go. So just remember that wherever there's a set of rules, wherever you're accountable to someone, you're in relationships of some sort. And sometimes, based on these models, that's kind of how we can review our relationship with God. We try to apply these models in a religious position, and it can become confusing because maybe we don't know what model we apply to or which model we belong to. Are we in a relationship with God because we're born into it, and as we grow, here are the rules? Are the rules given to us beforehand, and then we have to work on developing a relationship? Or are we just in limbo and hope that we don't mess up so that we don't get any nastygrams? Where do we stand? And as we talk about this, some of you may think or take it to a real theological approach. Some of you may look at it from more of an emotional approach as you try to figure out what all this means. And why is that? It's because some of us were taught the family model. We grew up on that. But over time, it doesn't feel like the family model. It feels more like the club model or the neighborhood model. Or maybe we grew up with the club model because that's all we knew. And we have no idea what a family model feels like or what a family model looks like. So then we end up wrestling with some questions like, how does my behavior line up with God? What does God expect of me? When am I in? When am I out? Where do I stand? And most of all, how in the world am I supposed to know? So this helps. So to help us narrow down these questions to a basic framework of our own struggle with this, we're going to go back and look at one of the oldest, most well-documented set of laws, most well-known set of laws, which is the Ten Commandments. And by all accounts, given to Moses around 1446 BC or so. And an interesting thing about the Ten Commandments is that as you get older, you tend to forget what they are. I mean, nobody really knows all 10 of them anymore. You maybe know 2, 3, maybe 4 on a good day, but not everybody remembers what they are. I mean, at some point you had to learn them as you grew older, and you had to memorize them because maybe you had to take a test or a quiz, but you don't always remember what they are. And that's okay. And another amazing thing that you don't know or you maybe have forgotten is it'd be so easy for somebody to hand you a Bible and ask you, is the Ten Commandments in there? Sure, absolutely. Without a doubt. 100% sure. Got it. It's in there. But then the next most logical question that comes is, where? And at that point, it's most likely where you're going to just nod, smile, and try to hope they just forget the question they just asked you so you can navigate that way through it. And in fact, when I was preparing for this message, I didn't know the answer to that question either. I have no idea where it's at. Didn't have a clue. Knew it was in there. Knew it's in there somewhere. Big, thick book. It's in there somewhere. But I didn't know. So now I do. And now I'm going to help all of you to know so that the next time it comes up in conversation, you know exactly where to go. And hopefully you'll end up remembering more than just 2 commandments. So everyone repeat after me. And people watching at home, you can be weird with us too. It's no problem. We still love you. Exodus 20. Exodus 20. Where can you find the 10 commandments? Oh, man, we need to hook him up with some of that cold brew nitro. Just uplift them a little bit. So if you don't remember anything I say today, at least you'll remember Exodus 20. And then that way you didn't forget where that's at. So last week, Pastor Chad talked about Abraham and about how God promised him a great many things and that he would be the father of many nations. So I'm going to give you a little backstory real quick, and that's going to lead us to where we're heading to. So Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob, and Jacob had 12 sons, which eventually became the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of his sons, Joseph, was outcasted by his brothers, and he ended up in Egypt. Rose to favor with the Pharaoh, and through a series of events, ended up bringing his whole family over to Egypt. And after a while, their generations began to multiply and multiply and multiply, until at one point there became some concern about Hebrews outnumbering the Egyptians. So the whole family was then enslaved. Now, that took place over several years. I think it's 400 and some change. So long time. So fast forward, Moses shows up, and he's going to set them free. And now they've been freed, and they're on their way back to Israel. So on their way back, they stop at Mount Sinai, where Moses receives the 10 Commandments from God. And these are the people who have been slaves for generations, right? So they don't know anything about rules and laws other than the little stuff that they've developed in their groups, in their little civilized groups, which really isn't laws. It's just more like a couple little rules and some boundary settings that they've created. And that's kind of what they've been utilizing to kind of govern themselves as best they can. But now this new set of laws, the 10 Commandments, is going to be the guiding factor that's going to help them in their progression moving forward. So what we're going to read here in just a second is an introduction to the 10 Commandments. And in the first couple verses, we will be able to gain insight onto how the rules, God, religion, and laws kind of just all come together. So in, what was the chapter again? Exodus 20, verse 1. It says, "And God spoke all of these words, I am the Lord your God." Now, naturally, they would be a little confused. And they would begin to question the how, the why, the when. Because, again, they've been enslaved for 400 years in Egypt. They don't know anything about what's going on. And Moses has helped with God perform some miracles, get them out of Egypt. And then now they're kind of looking like all of a sudden you're God and we're your people. This doesn't make any sense. We're totally confused. And then he goes on in verse 2 to say, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So basically, he's saying, I am the Lord your God, who has done something miraculous for you, even though you have done nothing for me. And when you've given up hope, I sent a deliverer to rescue you and to bring you out of slavery. And they were like, yeah, we know. I mean, we were there. We saw it. But we haven't done anything. Like, we don't know what the rules are. We don't even know if we've broken the rules. Like, we don't even have rules to follow. We're so confused right now. And God says, I know. That's why I'm here. And then God says, here's what I want you to know. Let's get everything out on the table. You're mine, and I am yours. And we need to get that established first before we start talking about the rules. And at the end of Exodus, right before the Jews leave for Israel. So where this is talking about is before they make the journey to Mount Sinai. This is 3 weeks prior. They're in the Egypt for the last night. And God speaks to the people through Moses and says, I only want you to do one thing. One thing. It's not the easiest thing, but it's one thing, and it's sort of easy. I want you to trust me. Just trust me. Tonight, before you go to bed, I want you to slaughter a lamb, smear the blood over the tops and sides of your doorways. And they said, why would we do that? And God says, trust me. But what difference is it going to make? Trust me. But it's not going to make any. Trust me. So that night, they had a meal, slaughtered a lamb, smeared the blood. And then he told them, pack up all your belongings because we're going on a trip. We're leaving. First thing in the morning. We're heading out. Bye. And they said, yeah, but we've been living here for like 400 years. And all of a sudden we're supposed to trust me. And that night the angel of death swept through the land and passed over their houses. And from then on they would celebrate the feast of Passover. So let's fast forward. Here we are 3 weeks later at Mount Sinai, and God says, I am the Lord your God. I am yours, and you are mine. And now that we've established this relationship, I'm going to give you some laws and some rules so that y'all can live together. And then he gives them their first commandment. In verse 3 where it says, you shall have no other gods before me. Now at this point they were kind of looking around, looking at each other and was like, really? Like, you kidding? Like, that's it? You delivered us from slavery. You gave us a future for ourselves, for our family. You gave us land so that we can grow. And all we have to do is just not have any other gods besides you? That's it? Done. Check and checkmate. You're the man. We got you. That was easy. What's next? So here's what we need to think about, and here's what this kind of helps us to understand. That the 10 Commandments were a confirmation of, not a condition of, Israel's relationship with God. It was just to remind them that they're his children. See, this wasn't conditional, right? It wasn't conditional on the relationship. It wasn't like, these are the 10 things you have to do to be my people. And if not, cool. We'll get rid of you. We'll find some other people, and they'll be my people. God made it perfectly clear to them. You're my people. I'm yours. The relationship is established. Now I want to help you live together and live under my authority. So what does this help us with? Well, it helps us with God. Relationship is going to precede the rules. The relationship always precedes the rules. It's part of our family model. For us, that means that God adopted this family model and chose not to use the club model. And that's how he treated the nation of Israel. He treated them like a parent would, right? You do good, you do good. When you do bad, you go in timeout. Sometimes you go in timeout for like 70 years, but you're just in timeout. I didn't forget about you. I still know you there. And when you done learn the error of your ways, we'll bring you back in. It's the same thing when you kind of punish your child. Go to your room. When you can learn to behave, you come back out. I didn't forget about you. I know you were in there. Sometimes they think you forget about you when they're like, I've been in here for like half an hour. Can I come out now? No. I still don't think you learned the error of your ways. Did you forget they were in there? Of course I forgot they were in there. I was doing other stuff. It happens. But if you take this journey seriously, you're going to see that all this ends up circling back to the rules are just confirmation of, not condition of, our relationship with God. But sometimes We get bored. So we started thinking of weird things like, what if God had favorites? Like maybe he had favorites. Maybe he just thought Abraham was a really cool dude and was like, that's my boy. He's the man. No other reason, just he's the man. And maybe he picked the nation of Israel like blind. He was just like, bam, we're going to pick them. Yeah, y'all are going to be the nation I pick. And then everybody else is just like, okay, well, we don't really know where we stand. If he's got favorites and I'm not his favorite, he's missing out on a good time. I don't know. What if we're just in limbo? What if it's just like, hey, do the best you can and we'll figure it out in the end. We'll see if you were good enough to make it in. Now, the Ten Commandments, that's just going to be a standard that everybody's got to follow. But it's going to be kind of vague, and we're going to make it hard and not really clear, so you don't really know what's going on, and you won't know if we grade on a curve or not, so good luck. That would not be fun at all, by the way. I don't like not knowing. Got to know something. Got to help me. Give me some rules to follow. But one thing is for sure, is that that's not how it's going to happen. Because when God made the promise to Abraham, which we saw last week, it wasn't about one person or about one nation. It was about all mankind. We could even look at Genesis 18:18, where it says, all the nations on earth will be blessed through you. So it's not just one nation. It is all the nations. Even by the prophet Isaiah in 49:6, it says, I will make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. He's saying, I'm going to make you into a sign for everyone to see, that you're going to be like a light, like a beacon, like a billboard, so that the rest of the world will all know. Because it's bigger than just one person or one nation. It's about everyone. Now, let's fast forward 1,500 years. Now Jesus is walking the earth. And he's healing people. He's doing crazy stuff with the weather, doing party tricks, whispering to winds and whatnots, performing miracles. Like nobody could possibly imagine any of this stuff, right? And then even his people who were closest to him were scared of him because he's just doing weird stuff and they just didn't expect it. And all he's saying is, hey, just trust me. I got this. Trust me. And John, one of the people who knew him best, in 1:12 says, yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Jesus said, God began a nation through Abraham, as God adopted the nation of Israel as his own. So that invitation to become a child of God has been extended to all mankind. It's the family model, which means that anything I require of you is evidence of my love for you. It's evidence that we have a pre-existing relationship with God, that you can trust me because all along it's been about you. So that's the question that we're going to have to ask ourselves today. What is my relationship with God? What's my relationship model? As everyone stands in the house this morning, as our team begins to make their way out, that's going to be the question I want to challenge you with to carry on this week as you meet for your small groups, for our life groups, is what is your relationship model with Jesus? What does it look like? Are you in the family model? Are you in the club model? Are you still trying to figure out what's the neighborhood association model? Whatever it is, whatever it may be, that's what we're going to try to figure out for ourselves.